Hey there friends, and welcome to February. We are a few weeks early, go us. And as you can see from our sweet little setup this time around, I've lit my candle sitting in one of my favourite mugs by Marley and Lockyer, popping out my pigment liners and my white gel pen, my scissors ready for a Dutch door. Working on a Calce Venetian plaster background, that beautiful pink, it's called Glimmer Puts with the actual gold flecks, which are lovely. Working with my Van Gogh Royal Talents Professional Series paints that I got for Christmas from my loves, thank you. My paintbrushes, you would have noticed there were lots in that little space. I actually love a really inexpensive one I found in Spain, in Barcelona, in a market stall. It has a really sweet little tip, but it still holds lots of water and lots of paint. So you will see that sitting there on my palette. Ready to be picked up at a moment's notice. Okay, so let's kick off straight into our February page keeper. That's on a 250 GSM black cardstock, so I'm actually just doing a pencil sketch there, so hopefully you can zoom in and can see that if you're interested. Theme this month, again, we're moving on with our a little bit of vintage coastal, our mason jars, terracotta, all of the beautiful bits, and definitely with a strong vintage theme. This month features a lot of the little chamomile flower, so you will notice in our cover page where I actually do a mason jar with a chamomile garden. So this is the theme, so I followed that along with my page keeper, adding in sweet little chamomile flowers, so you can see that I pencil that in with a sweet little stamen, which is just virtually a triangle, which is just a fancy way of doing a little triangle, and then adding 3, 4 or 5, maybe even 6 petals depending on the shape and what works on the aspect of the flower. So sometimes we're looking at a flower from the side, sometimes we're looking at it from the top, so it's important to just change the aspect and have those interesting features, but just play with what you feel works for you. I've done a lot of including lots of drawing this month so that you can see my style, but my style is very loose. I feel it as I go. You'll see me pick up my kneadable eraser and change things up as I go. You'll see me add them in, so we'll talk about it as we go, but we're just working on the little page keeper at the moment, adding in some little buds, some leaves, a sweet little honeybee. You can see where he's flown. So that's actually my first little, not a page I guess, but a page keeper, a little 3 centimeter wide by however long your page is if you're creating a book like mine, or if you're just cutting out from a sketchbook that you currently work in, a journal. So it's up to you if you want to add that in. I love that I can add whatever pages in suit me by creating my own journal, and you've seen me do that already, so in January. Okay, so moving on to my cover page, you can actually see the watercolour I created earlier in the month. I actually sketched this back in December, I think. Didn't have time moving house and everything else that goes on. I did not have time to colour it, and I finally sat down and enjoyed some time over the weekend watercolouring in that little mason jar. White flowers are hard, I'm still learning, so adding in that colour and the shadows behind, thinking of the sky or water or what would be in your mason jar, completely up to your imagination. And the sweet little chamomile garden tag that you can see there. You can see I've cut a Dutch door in, which was very simply done with a cutting mat and a sharp blade. And you can see me adding that to my handmade journal before I move on to the next page. So hopefully I'm trying a different setup this month to try to pick up more of what I'm doing. So hopefully I'd love to hear in the comments if you find that this works for you. I'm sure I've done a lot of my actual typography as I create, so I do get a lot of questions about my style of calligraphy, so hopefully this helps you. As you can see, it's very loose. As I do each letter, most every time I do a stroke of a letter, I actually go back and add the shadow in as I go. This has been done in pencil. I do generally do it really lightly in pencil first. This colour palette was sadly lacking from January. I did this a lot last year and just love playing with the colours. So this is actually the colours that I have used in the actual mason jar, the Camomile Garden mason jar image that you can see there, the watercolour. So I have used, just to let you know, lots of the cerulean blue, the ultramarine, the cobalt, and I've just watered them down. Added in a little bit of the Viridian. So working with lots and lots of loose colours, I do paint this, so I might link one for you below from when I've done it previously, and I've shared how I've done it. I don't draw the squares in this at all. I actually just feel my way and add the colour. The brown is mostly burnt umber, and I've actually just added a lot of water into that, and then added in extra pigment, sometimes wet on dry, sometimes just wet on wet, and let it bleed and bloom as it feels free to do so. The Payne's Grey is the grey that's there, loving Payne's Grey. So this is wonderful working with a professional set and actually being able to tell you the colours that I've used. Previously to this, I've actually only used student colour paints. Didn't want to spend money that I didn't have up front. I wasn't even sure if watercolour and me were going to be, compatible. So don't feel like you have to spend a lot of money. And like I said, I still use the brushes I picked up at a market. They come with memories for me. They don't have to be an expensive brand. I couldn't even link it for you, I don't think. So they're just an acrylic brush. They have a sweet little tip on them, but a nice fat belly to hold lots of paint. You can see me colouring in the colour palette here. Quite often when I'm working on this paper, I actually sorry, lost my train of thought. I actually start with my pencil very, very lightly, because this paper is actually a 190 GSM watercolour paper, so it's got really highly textured. It's beautiful. And I actually prefer to use 0.03 pigment liner from Staedtler. Staedtler's my go-to every time. So I tend to use a 0.03 on this paper. You can see that I felt that it still looked a bit naked. It needed a bit more, so I decided to add some of my chamomile flowers in there. And as you can see, I've penciled those in first very lightly, so I'll erase those a bit later. And then I've gone back in with my pigment liner and very, very gently, 0.03, I'm just going in and colouring those, inking those so that you can see them and they stand out, and they'll be quite lovely. I could do the flowers first, I guess, and then add the paint if I wanted to. I can do that with a pigment liner. However, I never do. I always do the sweet colour palette first, and then I work from there and I add in that ink. So I hope that that helps you see that when I draw the petals, they really are perfectly imperfect. I wiggle the brush so that the leaves are quite toothy and the petals are soft and they're flowing. And then you can see that I've picked up my kneadable eraser. Love this eraser. And I'm just gently, it looks like I'm being a bit brutal, but I'm not. It's actually quite, I do it very gently, just rub over and take that pencil mark out, and then share some of those close-ups, so stills with you so you can see the detail. So just loving the colour palette. It always inspires me having that in the pages of my journal. Okay, so I then actually turned over, so I picked up my cover page where I did the Dutch door and turned that over, and which is what you can see me working on this second. And I use that as part of my month at a glance. I did do a bigger calendar this year, which I really love, actually. I found that I've used this and I refer to it a lot more than I did with the little pokey one that I did in the corner last year. It was just far too small, being about 5 by 5 centimeters. This one I find it so much better to work with, and I can actually plan where I need to be, what I need to be recording. Like this month I'm actually early, which is good, which I should be. You want to plan your diary with me, hopefully. And you'll want to plan it a little bit in advance. I think most of us, when we're doing a bullet journal, we like to plan and we like to organise our life. It's part of what we do, so, and what makes us happy. So this one is, I've just shown you quite a lot of detail. I don't work with a bullet journal that has a traditional dot grid. I prefer to use with a blank page, And it's because I add a lot of detail. I add watercolour elements, I add Copic, marker, I add a lot of imagery to mine. So again, if you feel that a dot grid works better for you, by all means, go and do that. And if you find that that makes it easy for you, I don't mind grabbing my little ruler and just kind of doing a quick workout how I'm going to plan and fit it all in. But if you're a person that is a bit more time poor, or you prefer that dot grid, by all means jump in and use your dot grid. Anyway, so this one is actually done on just a plain, so the backing from the back of the Dutch door. That one is the 190 GSM watercolour paper, so you can see that the colour is a little bit grayer, it's very highly textured, and the other page is a digital silk, which is very crisp white. To me, I don't mind that they cross over to those pages, but for you, you might be a purist and prefer the pages to be the same. That's completely up to you. So then again, I've shown you how I've added the calligraphy in, how I've numbered my pages. You'll notice I added the 31st of January, which you would have, if you followed from last month, you'll notice that I left it off last month's calendar with the intention of adding it into this one so that my months actually run together smoother than they have previously. Something I did notice, and that drove me a bit crazy last year, it felt like all the months were so defined. And let's face it, that's not how life works. Everything runs from one to the other, and months fly by, days fly by, weeks fly by. We're busy people. So you can see me switch my pen out here. I picked up the 03 and they went, no. On the digital paper, I prefer to use the 0.02. The digital silk has as it's called, has a really silky finish. So you will see me be quite careful with my little ruler here. I love this little clear ruler because I can actually see through what's happening on my page as well. So this is my go-to, and although it looks like I'm being quite specific with my straight lines, the edge of this ruler is actually quite chopped up and damaged from using it with my cutting knife and using it. I've had it for years and years and years. And so it still has a little bit of a bumpy edge. It's not perfect, and for me that's perfectly imperfect for me. For me, it's the fact that I can see through that ruler. It's handy, it's flexible. I can use it, and I have a couple of them actually, and I use them time and time again, and they're always my first thing to reach for. And being clear, I lose them constantly. The catch cry in my house is, where's my ruler? Where's my pencil? So here you can see me again adding in my calligraphy. I've shown you how I've done the pencil sketch and the setup first. The squares were really quite simple. They're just a 3 by 3 centimeters. So I just marked off, you saw me mark off the increments, and then I just go through and add in. And again, I work really light in that pencil, so hopefully you can see enough detail. February is missing a couple of days on this calendar, and they'll be included in March. Again, I've done that on purpose so that my months will run together. I can't see the point in adding a whole extra set of squares, having to make things, squish them in, or to keep them so defined. So that's my choice. And February will run over into March, just as January ran over into February. Okay, so I've added some more of my chamomile flowers. I like to keep my theme quite strong between each of my themes. So each of my months, sorry. So I've added the little chamomile flowers along the top. I've kept the set out similar, and if not very, very similar to January's. You can see me working across onto the actual watercolour paper. The 0.02 works fine on this paper too, but it's highly textured. So I find that the ink gets a bit lost. Some of the lines get a bit lost on the paper. The texture is something that I love, so it doesn't bother me. The ink actually doesn't bleed through to the other side as well, so that's not an issue for my actual mason jar. But I did scan that watercolour in previously to moving on and using it here, so that if I want to add that, and I want to vectorize that, you can see me now switching out to my 0.03. Gave up on the 0.02. I needed a bit more weight. So what was I saying? So I did switch out my marker, and I'm just filling in my my calendar the same. I have put Valentine's Day in there on the 14th. That's one that hopefully we will remember. I'm not a big one for Valentine's Day, but any reason to celebrate is my motto. Any reason to celebrate life and my loves. So in February this year, I have been requested from stockists to create some cards and some things like that. So February the 14th will be an important one for me for work this year. So I do need to keep in mind exactly where that is, that I have stocked to them in time to make the most of that date. So do keep that in mind if you're working in this area and you need to be on top of, you know, the events that are coming up. Just because I might not celebrate Valentine's Day doesn't mean that a lot of the country doesn't. So it's important to keep that in mind. So you can see there I've added the 31st of January in, and then I've gone on to February. And I'm just inking the last of these for you now, and then we'll move on to the next one. So there's our month at a glance with a little bit of colour added in to show that it's a white flower with a green leaf. And then we've moved on to the mood tracker. Now this was actually really fun. I really enjoyed this one this month. I kept with my chamomile garden, of course, adding in a jar. This one kind of it created itself. And I have to admit that most of what I create, most of the pages I create, most of the paintings I do, the watercolors that I do, the sketches, they tend to create, they become all on their own. They do speak to me as I create, and this one certainly did. So I was trying to keep in mind that for my mood tracker, when I'm designing something, I need to, well, for this particular one, I need to think about how many days there are in the month. And sometimes fitting, 30, 31 days or 30, 31 motives onto a page is a challenge. So my thought process for this one was to simply do a huge bunch of flowers, which is exactly how the sketch initially started. So I did do the sketch in the evening when I was doing some planning for this one, but I do come back to this, so you will see some more of what I do. So hang in there, it's coming. But I'm just inking this one in with my white gel pen. So I've actually done a lot of the flowers and the leaves, and I've done the sketches, as I said early on. Now I didn't have all the flowers in place, and because I need to put in, for my mood tracker, the whole point is to somehow signify how your day was, to keep a track of your month, so maybe your times when you're feeling a little bit more flat or more motivated or more productive. It's good to look back and think when you're being hard on yourself. Do you know, actually I had more productive days than I had days where I felt or I felt unhappy or stressed or overwhelmed. So it is good to look back and realize you're actually working harder than you give yourself credit for. So I started putting together all these beautiful little flowers, these little blooms, and then of course my mind went to a little jar. So I started adding in this little jar and wanted to have something that was a little bit of a different shape, just because it's fun. Don't want to have it all the same. So I'm putting in the little reflection, or you may even do it as a double wall, so it makes it look more three-dimensional. I just do it as I go. I feel it. So a lot of those lines weren't existing on the pencil sketch if you're looking in close. So I do then just write down there. So I've written happy, I'm feeling happy and productive on those days. You can see my gel pen is starting to run out in a couple of those lines. I might need to get another one. It does get such a workout in my studio. So I've literally just written happy me, and balance. They were my ones for this month, for thinking of the days that happy me are generally the days I'm feeling really productive. Are the days when I'm feeling exhausted and that I just can't focus on anything. And then balance are going to be the days that I'm remembering to spend time with my loves. Give myself a day off. Now you can see I've just popped down a piece of my watercolour paper towel. As you can see, it's absolutely covered in colour, but they dry overnight when I've been watercolouring in the evening, and I can never bear to throw them away. So most of the time I end up just reusing the same paper towel, which is very sustainable and environmentally friendly, and rather inspiring with all that colour on it. So you see that I just picked that up so that I didn't lean on the white gel pen anywhere it still might be wet and smudge it. So that's why I popped that down. So I filled in my mood tracker heading, and then you can see me coming back now with my pencil. And you saw me at the beginning, you saw me putting my finger on each of those. So I was actually counting how many I actually had done and thinking I need to have 28 for February. I think I counted 23. So I'm thinking, okay, where do I need to add in my extra 5 flowers? And because I'd actually put in, so you can see I'm really doing this just live with you, working it out, seeing if I'm happy with how the petals are sitting, the shape. Yeah, just playing with it, erasing lots, see if I'm not happy with my kneadable eraser, and just feeling my way there. So now that I'd actually put in my key, the happy me, the art and the balance, I could work out where some additional flowers might fit. So feel free to plan it within an inch of its life, or to feel your way like I do. I quite often come back in and add bits and pieces, so I do apologise. Sometimes you'll see me do something and then when you look at the still at the end, you're like, oh, that looks different, or that's an additional bit added in here or there. Well, that's just the artist in me, and I can't help myself. I have to just add a little bit in when I feel it needs it. So here I am just adding in some flowers. I do feel that it was getting a bit full at the top, although I did love how I organised the actual topography at the top there. I like that the flowers overlapped and it made it feel like the lettering was kind of blooming out of that bunch of flowers. But I did feel that little sprig of flowers was needed here at the bottom of the mason jar, just to balance that there and make it and to dress it up. So I will come in and I'll ink this with my white gel pen in just a moment before we move on to the next page. Okay, showing my final still of my sweet little mood tracker, and I hope that you enjoyed that page too. I really did love that one. Okay, so I actually started on this one, but my video, the actual recording glitched, so I only actually see the first couple of minutes of this one, so I do apologize. So I did slow down the still to show you the detail at the end. But this is actually my affirmation page, so I always start with, I always add a quote in on this one. I also put all my goals, have a space for to write down my wins, some events that I have on. I quite often keep track of some of the important things for my business on this page. So quite often it's on a page that is not, it's not a page I share with everybody once it's done. It's a page where I write, it's for me to write down lots of bits and pieces in regard to my business and to remind myself every day to be kind to myself and to be balanced. So my quote this month was from Hans Christian Andersen, which of course is the wonderful children's writer. Just living is not enough. One must have sunshine, freedom, and a little flower. And absolutely is indicative of what I'm trying to encourage myself to remember this year. So I felt that this one was such a good fit, and I'm really focusing on, with my affirmations, of choosing ones throughout the month that I see, and I see quotes and lyrics, and I hear them and see them everywhere I go. So I do try to scribble those down in my diary, or to keep a track of them, to add and a little reminder to myself to be kind to myself and to have that balance, and to choose not just to be working constantly. It's good to have those breaks. So I added in some of my little chamomile flowers there, a little sun, a little balloon to signify freedom. before I moved on to my weekly planner. Once again, I share a lot of my planning for my weekly planner. I have broken mine up into just 3 days this month. I am finding that I'm a bit lacking for space, so I'm giving myself a little bit more space this month to write everything in that I'm doing and that I need to do, and keeping track of all those things. So I have purposely given myself a little bit more space. Plus I wanted to add the little chamomile garden at the bottom this month. So I think it sits nicely. The columns will be 3 quite narrow columns, but lots and lots of space to add in lists and details. You'll see once again that my little stamens, my little flowers, it depends on the aspect. So I do them in, facing all different ways. A sweet little, a glorified triangle really for the center, and then some little wibbly wobbly petals that droop and reach for the sun depending on the aspect of the flower. Add in some little leaves and some grasses before I add in all my columns and things like that. You will see that I had pencil sketched this one up quickly beforehand, so I'm inking that for you, and you will see that I'm taking a little bit of care when I'm working with my ruler to lift it off and not drag it so it doesn't smudge. This is the digital silk paper, so I do have to take care that it does smudge a little bit more easily because the ink takes a little bit longer to dry. For me, that's not a big issue. It just takes a couple more seconds. It doesn't take a long time. And then you can see that I've just picked up my kneadable eraser to take off those pencil lines, the faint ones that you can still see, before I've picked up my Copic markers to add in that beautiful, delicious colour. I just love working with the Copic markers with this page. These are white flowers, so I'm just adding a little bit of a grey stroke here and there just to signify some shadows and detail on the petal without really adding in colour, and then adding in with one of my favourite greens, and I love the brush on these particular pens, so I'm just adding that in to have a little bit of detail there. I do a quotes page next, but I did paint that at night time, so I didn't actually get to video that, so I'm just going to show you a still. But again, I do always like to have a space to add in some favourite quotes, so you will see a still of that one in a moment. I have used my brush pen again to add in the days, so you can see that 31st is actually of January. It's the day following over that was missing previously, and then I've launched straight into February, and then I just simply go around that and shadow it with my pigment liner, the 0.02. So it's very simple, but I just love this setup, so I certainly hope you do too. And coming to a close, so again for another month, I really hope that you enjoyed the video this month, and I hope to see you again next month. Please leave any questions or feedback for me below. Goodbye.